All right, welcome back. It is already Thursday morning. We are back on S100. Have a little bit of testimony this morning, and then we're going to work with David Hall on going through the bill and hopefully finish it up this evening, before this evening. So the folks that are here today, Katie Karen and Abby Jeffries, do you want to testify together or do you want to just do one after the other? Let's do one after the other. So we'll start with Katie. So Katie, please join us. They requested time to talk about S100 and they'll represent themselves, but they're from the Vermont Attorney Title Corporation and New England Federal Credit Union. And so we have them in. And then at 10:15, we have Kirby Dunn coming in from Home Share Vermont. There was a request in the Senate bill as it passed the committee for an appropriation for their work. So we'll hear from her to discuss that. And then after that, then we'll work with David Hall. So Katie, we're just going to go around the table. I'm Representative Tom Stevens. I live in Waterbury.
Joe Parsons, Newbury, Thompson, and Groff.
Caleb Elder, Starksboro, Bristol, Lincoln, and Moncton.
Dennis Labonte, Linda Newick, Sutton, Sheffield, Wheelock.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burrows, and I represent Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor.
And I'm Larry, Larry Labor. I represent Essex, Orleans, District 1.
I'm Mary Howard, and I represent Rutland District 6.
And Robin Chestnut Tangerman, representing Rutland Bennington District.
So welcome. And
Ashley Bartley, Fairfax, Georgia.
welcome. The microphone is yours.
Okay. My name is Katie Karen. I am from Milton, and I am an agency advisor with CADIC. Vermont Attorney's Title is our other company, part of CADIC. So we're a title insurance company. And in my position with my job with CADIC, I drive around the state and work with attorney offices and train them. And I'm also part of the Vermont Mortgage Bankers Association. So I'm on the Board of Governors and chair of the Legislative Committee. So we're here today to thank you for your time and all of your efforts with S100, obviously. And with Act 250 and permitting, we will talk to the other committee about that. So Abby will talk more about the lending side of things. She's more familiar with that. She is the mortgage loan supervisor, one of the mortgage loan origination supervisors with New England Federal Credit Union. So the Vermont Mortgage Bankers, we consist of appraisers, title insurance companies, lenders, brokers.
I believe they're just.
Okay. Appraisers. So in our groups, we focus on education and obviously topics of interest such as this. Let's see here. So I think with that, I'm ready to hand it over to Abby. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, and so you're going to talk about zoning issues. Again, we're focusing on, which is fine, and we're focusing on adding stock. And I'm just curious from your perspective before we go over here.
Okay.
What are you seeing in terms of stock? I mean, we know the statistics at all levels, with perhaps the exception of the highest income brackets, who can afford to build or buy pretty much where they need to. But what are you seeing in terms of the overall market with some of your folks? And is it really going down to a level of difficulty at the title level where, titles are meant to prove that this piece of property was the same piece of property it was the last time it sold and the last time it sold and so just sort of, if you could give us a little bit on what you're seeing with your multiple hats.
So the inventory is the issue, and it has been an issue for a very long time. So just lack of inventory is what we're seeing. As far as like the title insurance side, it's the same thing. Like if we can't insure a property because of marketable title issues with that, or people not being able to get the financing, because that is, we just don't have the properties available right now.
When they can't get the financing, is that because, just because there's a time frame on when you qualify for a mortgage and I will,
Yeah, I'm gonna give that one to Abby.
no, that's fair. No,
Okay.
and then if you could just please stay and just be around if you have a round
Definitely.
conversation about it, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much again.
Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking time and having me today. Like Katie said, I'm Abby Jeffress. I'm a mortgage loan origination supervisor at NEFCU. I'm going on 15 years there and going on 11 years in the mortgage department specifically. So a lot of different roles in my time there. And I can say the whole time purchasing a house has been challenging. We've always kind of seen there's a competitive purchase market in Vermont in the past few years. Of course, this is not news to anyone. Prices are really elevated. There's the lack of inventory. In very recent times now, we have rates increasing again. So it has all compounded to make it especially difficult, but it's by no means a brand new issue. I would say we've been seeing it for a long time. In terms of starting with a couple statistics, I think some of these you've probably heard a lot of times because I pulled them right from VHFA, but like the median home price went up to $310,000 in 2022, and you have over $555,000 for the cost of a newly built home. We have a pretty robust construction lending department at NEFCU, and we see that. And I can answer more questions specific to the construction lending and some of the pain points we see there. In terms of some other data points that I tried to pull, I went back from 1993 on, which is data that I could access, and our average loan amount increase is 4%. So year over year, we'd expect 4%. In 2022, we saw a 15% loan amount increase. So where people normally have to borrow 4% more year over year because of inflation, it was 15% more. We're looking at an average loan amount in the range of like 284 last year. 1 quarter alone this year, we're already looking at 287. So we're continuing to see it grow. And one number that I think is always interesting and was something I kind of lived and breathed in my previous role at NEFCU, I was our secondary market analyst. So in that role, I set our rates. I helped trade, like sell our loans. I worked with Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. Pull through is very important on that side because you need to know how much coverage to take, how many loans you're going to have to sell. Where I think it's really impactful now, at best, our pull through is 33%. That means for the number of people we get in the door, 33% of those that have a full application with us, 1 in 3 are actually going to close. And when I say at best, I pulled that number very simplistically by saying, okay, our rate lock period is 60 days. So 60 days ago, how many applications did we take in? Now, how many closings do we have? And it's only about 33%. It's likely a little bit different than that because you have people that keep renewing because they can't find their pre-approval and it goes they can't find a house and it goes longer and longer than that first 120 days. So those were kind of just some interesting tidbits or numbers that I thought might be helpful for the perspective. And when I say that pull-through number, what that includes is people that have already met with us. We have certified financial counselors on staff. So by the time that application is in that number, they've already maybe met with a loan officer and not had their credit pulled and said, well, my credit is this range and, it's 620 and okay, you're targeting a VHFA program. That has a minimum of 640. So before I pull your credit, here's a NEFCU certified financial counselor, meet with them for free. Let's make a plan to get your credit improved and then come back and see me. So this number isn't including those people that never got to the application stage that are kind of already working. That number is more the people that are truly at that point, by all intents and purposes, ready to buy a home, pre-approval in hand, So their credit's okay, their income's okay, their assets okay. It's just a matter of whether or not the house is there for them with that pre-approval letter. Do you want to stop and ask questions as I go? I have different tidbits on that. I have some of the racial equity, that housing side that we're focused on, but I don't want to just breeze through all of it.
Well, you've made mention that you work with, I take it you work with VHFA, so you're part of the, are you part of the program for first generation
Yes.
home buyers? Can you, and use that as a kind of a segue into some of the other statistics?
Yeah.
We're very interested in, we only started that program last year, and we have an opportunity to continue it this year with another appropriation. Can you share your experiences with that?
Yeah, NEPCU actually closed the first gen loan for VHFA, and I was looking at, it looks like Maura Collins was just here. I was looking at that, and when she said there's been 6, I was like, we've had a lot of first gen closings, so I think we've had a good number of those first closings all throughout the state, because NEPCU serves the full state now. And it's been a really positive experience. We made the decision with that program, me and my counterpart, the other origination supervisor, for those, we ask our loan officers to attend the closing. There's a $150 amount of money that's awarded to the lender for each closing. We took a look at a lot of the different associations that were part of this and a part of the outreach, and said, okay, that 150, we're going to narrow the list down, and loan officer at the closing, you present a certificate and the borrower selects one from that list and donates to it. So again, it's not a huge sum of money, but NEPCU said, as the lender, we don't need that money. Let's look and let's pick some that we can donate to. So I can say from like the feel good standpoint, it's been incredible to get to attend all of those closings. Our loan officers always come back with really like positive stories. The most recent one, she was like, she hugged me and she thought she was never going to be able to get a house, and we were able to make it happen. So I have been it's been an awesome program, and it's been really well received. And when you look at VHFA and you look at all the money that you can layer in together, you can make a pretty impactful like amount for someone. Like when you start to look at the housing equity, NEPCU made a $3 million donation to CHT, and that's funding their homeownership equity program. So those are $25,000 grants to BIPOC, and that has a BIPOC specific overlay to it, which is okay from a fair lending standpoint. And then, so you can take that if someone's purchasing a shared equity home with CHT, you can layer that $25,000. They can get a VHFA mortgage. That's an additional $30,000 if they're going to qualify for VHFA Assist and VHFA First Gen. And you can truly get them into that home with a much lower out-of-pocket impact for them. And it stays perpetually affordable with how the VHFA shared equity program works. And we work with all of the shared equity programs now throughout the state. And you can layer VHFA with any shared equity program. So that's where we're starting to see kind of where you're able to make the most impact, is when you take one of the shared equities and you layer in assist grants and you layer in that $15,000 from First Gen right now, you're suddenly actually getting to in a very affordable standpoint. And still working with the borrowers, because we as the lender, we have to look at risk. Sometimes you get a little scared, like there's no skin in the game. Is this risky? Are you putting borrowers into situations that they shouldn't be in? Are they going to be able to keep this home? But you have homeownership counseling they're required to take. You do have minimum asset requirements. Some of this is, I want to say for CHT, it's $3,000, but you wouldn't quote me on that. I would want to look at the guide. But so you're kind of, and we work with them a lot. I have statistics here in terms of the homeownership demographics, and then just kind of before I share those on the focus note, like we are looking at what like the Root and Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust are doing right now in terms of their BIPOC specific homeownership education. me and my counterpart at NEFCU are going to be working with VHFA and CHG to potentially try to replicate that. I feel like the biggest barrier we're seeing is getting people in the door, especially like outreach to that BIPOC community. We tried an event at CCV in Winooski on a Saturday. We had kind of childcare options available. It was a Saturday, it was the right area, and it still wasn't that well attended. I think we had about 5 people. So in talking with VHFA, and they're working with a number of consultants, it's creating that affinity space and it's getting the right people in front of them, because it's hard to see there's all of this CHT money, and we as the lender are like, oh my gosh, we can layer CHT and we can layer this BIPOC grant and we can layer all of this money, but there's not necessarily the trust to get them into the door with us. So working with the right groups, establishing affinity spaces and getting the education out there kind of as step one towards that.
Representative Hilder.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. I would say on that last point, take it or leave it, but I think working with the Richard Kemp Center could be a really good move. I've had some conversations with their directors exactly about this. How do we let the communities who our programs are targeted really know about them and have an access to that program that is built on trust and, you know, familiarity and things. So anyway, I would certainly encourage you to also partner with the Richard Kemp Center, because I think that could be a great partner. The other question is how many units can you finance on a FHA loan if it's your primary residence?
So we actually don't have FHA lending right now at NEFCU, but it's typically 4.
Great, thanks.
1 to 4 family is going to be residential. And I will say we lost FHA funding during COVID for other reasons and haven't brought it back because we haven't seen the need. We have portfolio options, and we actually just had one. I had the loan officer come to me yesterday and was like, they were pre-approved FHA and they were going to have $28,000 out of pocket because they didn't have the best credit, but I made it work with VHFA and they have $15,000 out of pocket now. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so, but yes, 1 to 4 family is the same for FHA, and that's when you typically can get to that 3.5% down.
And sorry, it's the same for FHA. What about VHFA? Can I get my letters in the right order?
VHFA, I think, has a limit of 2 units as a primary residence. They're going to look at duplexes. I don't think, actually, I printed some VHFA things because I wanted to make sure. They're mainly going to look at a duplex as a max. That said, there's a lot of conversation happening around triplex and all that. We will allow, like at NEFCU, we have a portfolio program where we input the 3% down as a lender funded silent second. And depending on where their income is, if it's 80% AMI or below, we actually give lender paid PMI. So they don't have private mortgage insurance. We will allow a 2 unit for that. If it's a 3 to 4 unit owner occupied, there does have to be 5% of the borrower's own fund. So where we don't have FHA for the 3 to 4 unit, we keep it in our portfolio with 5% down.
Thanks.
But
So if I appreciate the comment that you made that trust is an issue. When they do make it in the door, when anyone does make it in the door, and they may not have the, I mean, I can understand a bunch of different reasons why there's mistrust, or just like, I don't know if it's scary looking at one's credit rating. What kind of, and I know that some of the other nonprofit housing organizations also have a financial literacy programs and that are parallel to what you're doing, and just what does it take for someone to go from, let's just use your example, from 620 to 640 for a credit rating? What are some of the suggestions that you make in order to get to a level where you feel that the risk is acceptable?
yeah, so it would depend. 620, we might look at it in our portfolio. I just know VHFA wouldn't. At NEFCU specifically, we're really fortunate to have financial counselors we call them financial counselors, credit experts. They go through a really extensive training and they're available to meet via Teams. So as the loan officer, I would take a look at the credit report. Is there something obvious? I might suggest it, but if not, it's going to become a really teamed approach. And I'm going to say, you know, we have these experts on staff. Are you willing to meet with them? Are you interested? They can do phones, they can do Teams, they can meet in person, they can do after hours, they'll do Saturdays. So they really try to be very available, and they're going to look at, I mean, some of the, I don't want to call it quick fix, but the faster things. Is there someone else that already has a credit card that you could become an authorized user on? If that credit card's been established for a while, that history is going to pull over. Are there credit cards out there with a high balance? Let's look at the one that has the highest balance. Can we get that utilization ratio down? So that's what the financial counselor is going to do. They have a knowledge where they're like, well, this will impact this portion of the score 20%, and this will impact this. So we as one specific institution will refer over to them just because they're experts and they're free. Even now, if you're not a member of NEFCU or VSCCU, if you're just walking in off the street, they will meet with you for free without you becoming a member. It used to be you had to establish the $5 membership, but we waived that recently. We do education with CHT and Wyndham and Windsor as well. We have loan officers that go and attend a Wyndham and Windsor training, a CHT training, and we're trying to get to some of the others, but those are the two that we've partnered the most with so far.
Have you ever had any couples or an individual come in that did not have a credit score? Because I know a couple individuals that pay cash for everything. They bought a car, cash. Whatever they bought was cash. Now they come to buy a house, of course, that's a big expense. And they got, excellent renting, stuff like that. So I'm just kind of curious on how you handle people like that.
Yeah, we would look at non-traditional credit, and typically you need 3 sources of non-traditional credit. So if it's rent, we'd order what we call a VOR, a verification of rent. We would send that to the landlord. And then we're going to look for 2 other non-traditional credit sources. Do you have Netflix? And do you pay Netflix monthly? And can we get a 12-month history of Netflix? Can we get that of your utility bill? We've had to get creative because there are some where like, no, I pay my electric bill cash. And I'm like, anything. Like, do you have any sort of subscription? Phone? Yeah. So it's non-traditional credit sources. Typically you need 3 of them. And even the PMI companies will accept non-traditional credit. So that means that you're not always having your required 20% down in those cases. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've seen television commercials that, what are some of the credit ratings companies are saying, we're doing rent now.
Yeah.
Is that a non-traditional, do you use, if someone is paying rent and they're good and they don't have any dings on their record, they're paying anywhere from, we know rents are going up, but people are paying $1,000 a month or more. Do those are those being recorded yet in the credit reports that you're using or that you may use as alternative sources?
It'll go right now into the non-traditional route. Freddie and Fannie just announced kind of their long-term FICO score remodeling and all of that plan. I believe it's still like 1 to 2 years away. So right now we have to pull what's called a tri-merge score. So we're going to pull from all 3 bureaus and we're going to use the low mid. So the middle of the 3 scores and the lowest between all the borrowers. So we will steer people away from like the Experian Boost commercials. Kind of bother me because pay all this money and boost your score with Experian, but there's still 2 other bureaus and we have to use the middle of the 3. So until there's something that could fix it with all 3 bureaus, that doesn't work as well. And that's something that we as the loan officer might warn at a high level. And then we would refer over to the financial counselors, the law of like, here's the strategies that would help you fix it rather than spending your money paying just Experian to fix it.
So it's either revolutionary or it's a product.
Yeah.
Okay. Representative Chestnut Tangerman.
Thank you. Do you sell all your loans into the secondary market? So you hold some?
we service just about anything we can. So the only loans that are sold servicing released are VHFA loans because those have to be sold servicing released to US Bank. We will sell some what we would call conventional loans to Freddie or Fannie, but we sell them servicing retained. So payments, questions, everything still comes through NEFCU. And then we have a pretty robust portfolio. So we're able to make exceptions on certain products. We've been seeing a lot of not unconventional inquiries lately. I put some notes together on some of the inquiries we've had.
That's going to be my next question.
Yeah. So yeah, we have both. We have a pretty robust portfolio as well as selling.
So in my area, Bank of Orwell, if you had an unconventional house, that's who you went to.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you also have that flexibility.
Yeah.
Especially as inventory disappears.
Yes. I was sharing this before. We've had 2 requests in the past month to finance shipping containers. And could we finance a construction loan to make a shipping container livable? We see a lot of inquiries for yurts. And some, we will, again, being that we are a portfolio lender and we have the capability to make some exceptions, we will work with the title company and, hey, here's the situation. Can we get marketable title? What is the zoning on this? Is it currently commercial? Is it going to change to residential? So if we can get past some of those hurdles, we will look at, could we keep it in portfolio? We have financed a few yurts recently because they had enough features to be deemed livable and the overall situation worked. And I think there's such a shortage. People are just desperate for housing and they're getting very creative with what they're willing to live in.
I'm just curious, you ever have many people come in like with these, called these tiny homes?
Mm-hmm.
You get that, you do?
Yeah. And I would say, so VSECU sees, they have a pretty direct relationship with Vermods, which is kind of tiny home or modular unit. So with our merger, we're getting to see all of that too. So the tiny homes, the manufactured, the modular builds, we're seeing an increase in all of that because it's affordable. But I say that because even like the modular, we deal a lot with some of the big modular builders and you're easily up in the 400,000 and 500,000 for some of those modular builds now. So.
Which probably would be 600,000 with a site stick built, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a difference there, but
Yeah,
it's not what it
not
used to
quite
be.
enough.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, it was probably 350 on this much.
Yeah, there were some Vermonts that were, I mean, they've gotten really complex, they've gotten really good. But when they first started, you could get a subsidized home with a solar package for $150,000. Plus the pad, plus the land, but just, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, no.
The expenses. So to construction loans, and to the market, I asked you outside, I just wanted to delve into, we have programs that are both for missing the middle income, missing middle, we called it last year. We're apparently rebranding it this year to just middle income. And both for a revolving loan fund, which is one aspect that we would be, if it passes, we would be working with developers of multi-unit housing that would have some restrictions on financial demographics of who could live there. But specifically, you know, my philosophical question for you, if you can talk about it, is the market. So you said prices, an average sale or to build a home, because these are for about homes that are built or renovated, has gone up to $550,000. When we first started talking about this a year and a half ago, it was the number was 400,000. And so that's a 20+% increase. But we're being asked to subsidize for the developer and for a buyer in order to live in a home that may cost $550,000 to build, but it's not necessarily going to be appraised at that value. And the traditional way of doing things was, oh, the house costs $450,000 to build, therefore it's gonna cost $450,000 to sell to the first buyer. Having this out of whack seems to tell me that the market is, if not broken, then it's sprained. And I'm just curious what you're seeing or what you're coming across or what you think of, the government being able to, in this case, the state government being able to use funds to make these ends meet. Like what responsibility does a bank have or credit union to assess risk versus what somebody can pay? I'm just curious today, because that's a bigger market question. What's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, we're not seeing that many appraisal gaps yet. I think Vermont is still, like, prices are still high. And yes, every once in a while, someone purchases here and the appraisal comes in lower, but that's not happening consistently. It is happening sometimes. I don't have a statistics on like exactly how often, but the market for us is still pretty hot in most of Vermont. So you aren't necessarily seeing that appraisal gap yet. Where I see the missing middle is more like you have all of these programs that are at 80 and 100% AMI. But if you look at where 80 and 100% AMI is, and you look at childcare as well and all of that, is that even enough to live? And those are the homes that aren't available. Like the number of CHT and VHFA and all the other like community land trust program pre-approvals we have out there versus the housing that's in those stocks and in that affordability. And you look at where their purchase price limits are, that's where we really see the issue in the housing stock. We had conversations like in talking to some of the modular builders, and it's so many different levers. It's what's happening with the market and appraisals. It's what's happening with the money that's out there to support the borrowers. And then you talk to the builders and they're like, we can't build them. We don't want to build them. The red tape, the cost, the zoning, the permitting, we can't build it affordably enough for the borrower. So I know that's not this committee, but that's where I see it's all just so intertwined, is that side of the cost as well.
Well, I mean, it is just in terms of, overall it is, of course, but we don't have a direct line into the banking world, into the mortgage world to understand. Yes, we're trying to build or facilitate the building of more units, but again, how far is the interplay between what we can do as a state government as opposed to the private market? And because this conversation over the last 3 or 4 years has included much more of the private market, while at the same time dealing with the public market, the nonprofits and the need for the housing at what we've considered traditional affordable housing as opposed to housing that's affordable.
Yeah.
But also, with the increase in prices then in housing, what is that doing again for people who are coming in who may not have a great credit score? Or, our incomes haven't, our being Vermont's incomes generally haven't gone up 20% in a year. And so what is that doing for your work in trying to get, again, not just first gen, but first time home buyers in particular? And it's affecting, it could be a second time home buyer who's built, who's, you could not have enough equity to justify move, so I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. Like, we're almost locked because you have people that want to move and want to move up, but they're like, I don't know what's going to be available. Yes, right now the rate is a little bit higher, but now that there's recession talk, we're starting to see more and more people come in and be like, okay, like rate's a little more temporary, or, 2020 rates were obviously historical lows. People are getting a little bit more used to the rate now. 6% doesn't seem quite so bad. That's what ours 30-year was yesterday. But they don't necessarily want to move because they don't know where they're going to move. So you have people that aren't leaving that first house to open it up to someone else. You have people that want to downsize, but they can't quite downsize. Like, my parents are a perfect example of that in Essex, Vermont. They live in a raised ranch, and I'm like, guys, I'm out of the house, like, I've been out for a while now, and my mom's like, a condo would cost the same and we'd be paying an association as well. It would cost us more to live somewhere else, so people aren't leaving their housing to open it up. And so it's just, you're stuck from every direction. But I feel like in terms of the credit piece and in terms of all of that, that's where we're seeing the most support. And like, I talked to Seth Leonard a lot about Missing Middle and hearing all of those projects. Nephew was really involved in Butternut Grove, which was the last big CHT project. So hearing how like Bay Ridge is gonna be hopefully the next shared equity one, and you have like we were talking about Sacred Heart and Newport, and kind of how more of that's starting to spread throughout the state. Like those are huge, and I feel like that's helping that the kind of the lowest in the shared equity model and keeping it perpetually affordable. We already had our first Butternut Grove unit sell. So someone got into Butternut Grove and then actually could move up and move out of that CHT shared equity model. It opened it up for someone new and they went to the open market. So it's cool to see that already starting to work.
You see many people come in saying that they want to buy a piece of land and put a house on it compared to, buying it through a house that's going to be built?
Yeah, we see that a lot. We have a pretty robust construction program. Construction typically has to be done in 12 months. So pre-COVID times, I would say, someone might come in and they would have interest in a piece of land, and we would say, okay, here are some contractors, or do you have a contractor? They would reach out, they would get their quotes. We would close the construction loan starting with the land purchase, and then it would be built all in that 12-month period. Now with the availability of contractors, how far out their builds are, it's more likely someone's going to come in, find the land. They're going to purchase the land while they're working with a contractor, getting that quote, but it's so far out that construction loan's going to be even more down the road.
Could an individual build the house himself? And well, I'll give an example. I built my house, and my cousin and I built it. But in order to do that, we had to have a certified electrician and a plumber. And I did some of the electrical and plumbing, but they, came and inspected, but they did the final okay on it. But I mean, we started in towards the end of May, and we were in there in the middle of August.
Yeah.
And we built a 2-story house. So I didn't know if you allow individuals to do that.
So that would be a request to be your own GC. For us in particular, we're going to look at we're going to ask for a portfolio of work. What kind of experience do you have being a GC, especially in this market? The one exception to that being if it's a modular or manufactured. There are a couple companies out there that still will require you to hire a GC, or like that company is the GC, or they charge like a 10% markup to be the GC. Modular and manufactured, we will allow them to be the GC. We have a schedule of values, we have a checklist. We'll kind of help see through the process with a construction specialist. But I will say it is not as easy to get the approval to build the house on your own. Union Bank, I know, is one that probably offers a little bit more flexibility if someone's wanting to be their own GC and they don't have the experience that our underwriter is looking for. That's someone we'll refer to. But our board president is from VMBA, is on Union Bank, and works for Union. I was having a conversation with him recently, and he's like, yeah, we've seen more and more difficulties there. We're having to get away from it a little bit. I think it's the inventory issues, it's the contractor issues. It's harder than people think, and they run into cost overruns or availability or timing, and more projects go south quicker when it's that own GC situation right now. So we allow it, but with some caveats or some looking at, I would say.
All right, so coming back to S100, we didn't ask you about your thoughts possibly on the revolving loan fund for commercial developers. You do commercial construction loans?
Yep, it would be a separate division. So the residential side that I work on will only do 1 to 4 family. So commercial would be separate, but like with missing middle, and I've been talking to Seth a lot, there will be someone else financing the commercial side, but then we would be right there as who would be offering individual financing on the units, like when Sacred Heart is done, when Rye Meadows is done, when those are done, that's where we as a lender and a lot of the other VMBA members would come in. And especially it has to be the portfolio question. Shared equity condos aren't typically saleable to start. So all of the Vermont lenders kind of have to say, okay, like we had to go to our board and say, how much risk are we willing to take? How much concentration in Butternut Grove can we have? Because they all have to go in portfolio. Fannie and Freddie won't accept them quite yet as a new shared equity condo association.
But the idea of increasing construction costs, the revolving loan fund proposes to subsidize units depending on who it's pinpointed for. So the developer would receive more for apartments that were aimed at up to 80% or so, and then above 80% of it, they would receive a lower amount. But that's something that would help. Is that something you think would help the industry get more units built?
Yeah, I do think so. And we've even seen it ahead with, there's some in South Burlington and Williston that caught us by surprise, to be totally honest, because we knew of missing middle coming, but we didn't know that towns maybe already were doing it themselves. But it was Northridge and South Village, and so we've already seen it at play, and it helped. So yeah, that is something that we were in support of continuing.
Okay. Further questions for Abby right now? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
This facet of this this conversation, because I do think that this is again, when we're dealing with not just low-income individuals, but when 200,000 or more Vermonters file income taxes for less than $60,000, it's making an impact.
Yeah.
And so anything that we're trying to do is to try to open some of the, whether it's rental or purchase, to open those markets. So I thank you for your input on and for your expertise on this facet.
Thank you. And thank you for the support. I think again, with those programs, it's heartwarming to get to hear those closing stories and see when it does come to fruition and they're in that house. So. Yeah.
Just a quick question, and maybe this is a title insurance question for you, I'm not sure. How does Vermont's title insurance compare to other states? I sometimes have the impression that sometimes it's a higher cost because titles go back so far and there's like harder to search or something. And so maybe some of the upside risk is greater. Is that accurate? I've kind of heard that anecdotally over the years. I was just kind of curious, like, does Vermont have a title insurance requirement for new homeowners that's basically the same as all other states, or does it stand out in some ways?
That's a great question. I really don't know. I know that in Vermont, like with our competitors, we're all similar because we're rate filed.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know as far as the other states how we compare. I know they're different for sure. Like the way that they calculate their rates it's completely different. But I don't know how.
My sense is a lot of other states kind of went back in their records and kind of set like a floor like 150 years ago or whatever, and kind of said like, here's all the titles and here's where they start. Whereas in Vermont, they go all the way back to like, pre-1791 in some cases. And I don't know, I was working with somebody on land acquisition at one point, and they were shocked at like the Vermont title search. Having worked more in other parts of the state, they were just like, oh my God, these titles, they're so old. And some people had told me that affected title insurance rates, but it sounds like it's all just like filed rates.
No,
so it's all the same.
it's all the same. And whether you go back 40 years or, it's the requirement is 40 years.
Yeah.
It's 40 years?
40 years in Vermont, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to take it all the way back.
I mean, if you
No.
find an easement that you know, like it's right there on the 40 years, then yeah, you should go back as an attorney and look at that easement if it's before the 40-year requirement.
Okay, thanks.
But we only require 40 years. So.
We can finance in New Hampshire and Massachusetts as well, and we stick with 40-year marketable title across. And we have attorneys that worked in all three states for us,
Okay.
and they haven't shared a difference in that
No, that's
sense.
great. I just a somewhat random question that I figured you might have an insight on. Thank you.
Which could lead to the rabbit hole of going, what about ancient roads?
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Adverse possession.
Finance class 4 roads. That's another one that's come up a lot.
What about churches that are going out of business and they need to, anyway, that's the rabbit hole.
An old bank with a vault. That was the newest one we saw recently.
What's that? An old bank with a.
A former bank, there was a vault in the basement and it went to a primary res and it worked.
What did they
That
turn the
title.
vault into? Just
I
like
don't
a
know.
Sauna or something?
Yeah,
The bedroom.
How about Glebeland?
right.
Dennis,
Just really quick, Abby, I was wondering if you could send that information to Ron so he can get it to us, please?
Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you so much.
sure.
Thank you.
This was, I hope it was helpful to the committee.
Thank you.
Get a view on this. It is another example of where this committee can grow into in terms of not necessarily taking over the Commerce Committee's responsibilities for banking issues, but just so that we can understand the interplay between these items. I mean, just even the rabbit hole items we talked to, I mean, this wasn't an accident. It's just like, there are so many bits and pieces that title insurance has to deal with that is, I just love the idea of the, can we write a mortgage for a shipping container? I've been watching shipping containers I watch just in magazine articles, but just knowing that they're out there, but wow, it's difficult to do that. Of course it is, you know.
Yes, that was the one no we had to give recently, but yeah.
Okay.
And Caddick is domiciled in Vermont, which is really cool. And we actually, the Caddick Foundation donated money to the various housing programs around the state. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. Committee, we have Kirby Dunn who's here. Do you mind jumping right into this or do we want to take 5 minutes? And we'll just take a break after Kirby before we get David up. Just give him a call, he's on deck.
Good to me.
All right, let's just give us a second. Kirby will be right with you. All right,
It's confusing because
Kirby, happy-
they're there, but their eyes are there. Yeah, it's hard to wave.
Kirby, welcome. We're gonna go right around the table. We're different than we have been in the past since you've been here last. So let us just represent Tom Stevens. I represent Waterbury, Bolton, Huntington, and Buell's Gore.
Joe Parsons, Newbury, Thompson, and Groton.
Ashley Bartley, Fairfax, Georgia.
Caleb Elder, Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, Starksboro.
Dennis Labonte, Linden, Newark, Sutton, Sheffield, Wheelock.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burrows. I represent Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor.
Good morning, I'm Larry Labor. I represent Essex, Orleans, District 1.
I'm Mary Howard and I represent Rutland District 6.
Robin Chestnut Tangerman, representing Middletown Springs, Paulette, Rupert, Wells, and Tinmouth.
All right, so welcome Kirby. You have been the executive director of Home Share for quite some time. And we noticed in the Senate version of S-100 that there was a request, an appropriations request for $200,000. And just before we do our work on the bill to restore some of we're gonna review the policy behind it. But if you could just give us a breakdown of what your request is and, and spend a little bit of time just reminding us what Home Share is and how it addresses a particular niche of people who have housing. It's not quite an ADU situation, but it is a situation that works for some people.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thank you for those introductions. I really, really appreciate that. So home sharing is a simple program where someone's got an extra room in their home and they make it available to someone else who comes in as a renter in the home. And the unique thing about how we run our program is we really focus on screening and matching and trying to find the most compatible fit. And a lot of our matches are not really just rent, but they have a little bit of help involved. So about a third of our matches are people who just need some help around the home, and there's a no rent situation. A third of our matches are a combination of a little bit of rent and a little bit of help. And a third of our matches are what we would call rent only. Our average rent last year in our program was $340 a month. So it's a very affordable type of housing, if we can find the right match for you. It's a very labor-intensive process that we have of really screening and matching, trying to find the right fit, because somebody's living in someone else's home. They have access to the checkbook, the medicine cabinet, and the family silver. So we want to have a high level of confidence that this is going to be someone that they feel good about, that they trust. And one of our challenges is that, we have a lot more people who are looking for housing as we have homes available. And at any time, we have between 4 and 6 times the number, especially in the last few years, people looking for housing compared to people willing to share their homes. So one of the things we try to spend a lot of our time and effort on is really finding and encouraging more people to share their homes. We serve a currently 7-county area, which is the Champlain Valley and Greater Central Vermont area. In 2019, there was a sister program we had in Central Vermont who ended up closing, ran into some financial difficulties. We took on that area. Then, unfortunately, COVID hit, and COVID has not been kind to home sharing, needless to say. It just gives people another reason not to want to share their homes, unfortunately. But we're getting beyond that. We're getting people able to sort of think about home sharing again to a greater degree, which is wonderful. Our request to the Senate General Committee was really focused on a one-time allocation to increase our ability to serve more people. We want to focus on the Central Vermont region initially because we feel there's more capacity there than we are able to meet, and more need than we're able to meet with our current staffing. We currently have 3 full-time case managers serving 7 counties. They travel a lot, they go to people's homes. And so we really need to increase our capacity to do that. We think we have a longer term ability to increase our funding in philanthropic ways of just raising money, which has increased over the last few years. But we're looking for a one-time allocation to really be able to start to ramp up further in Central Vermont and then look at expansion. Our goal is to eventually be statewide, but we can't spread ourselves too thin. We really need to grow at a reasonable pace so that we can meet the need out there and not have to take a step back.
What is the average length of tenancy for a guest? Guest isn't the right word, but
we call them hosts and guests because we like that. Even though it's not an Airbnb, we're not an Airbnb, but we like those words because it kind of explains, who's who in the situation. But our average length of a match is about 18 months. Over half of our hosts will go on to a subsequent match. Most of our matches end because the guest does this for a while and then they move on to maybe a more permanent type of housing for themselves. So it's a great transitional type of housing. A lot of our guests are people in transition, maybe people moving to the state to be closer to family or to new jobs. Maybe they're coming out of a divorce and they need housing. Maybe they're going back to school and need to save some money. So it's really a great alternative type of housing for people for a period of time.
So when you say, often that there is a full or partial trade of rent for help around the house, that's not a skilled or specialized assistance. It's just general pair of hands.
Yeah, it's really what two people can agree on. In most cases, it's not going to be any type of personal care. It's not going to be that type of thing. It's going to be maybe helping with a couple meals a week, maybe helping with yard work or snow shoveling, or pet care is pretty popular, helping with the pets. Sometimes it's around technology, helping somebody learn how to use their computer or their stuff in the home. And a lot of times it's just companionship and, protective presence, somebody there just in case. And somebody just to be around.
During that, we'll call it 18 months average duration, what is your typical involvement during that time? Does it continue to be involved throughout?
Absolutely. We stay in touch throughout the duration of a match, and check in pretty regularly. We have a regular schedule of check-ins that we do. And then we're always available if issues arise or difficult conversations need to be had. We help people have those conversations so that our goal is to, if matches are to end, which they all will eventually, that they end well. So that's one of the goals that we have for every match.
Now,
so it's the kind of thing people can sort of do on their own, right? People can get roommates and it's not, rocket science. But we find that we really help prevent a lot of potential problems that could arise if people aren't familiar with doing this. And it gives people a lot of confidence and, addresses their issues around safety and security by having a third party there to help them through this process.
And is your placement typically an individual, or is it a family with children, or is it a range?
Yeah. 90% are going to be individuals and some will be two people. But if you think about it, if you're living in your home alone, it's hard to think about being outnumbered in your home. And most people don't feel like they have the room, certainly, to take more than one person. It's hard to get people to think they have that room because we all have extra bedrooms. That's what everybody likes to think of, all these extra bedrooms sitting out there in people's houses. Well, those people don't see those as extra rooms. Those rooms are doing something. They're waiting for the kids to visit, or they're turning into a sewing room, or they're, whatever it is. So to have someone else come into your home and be living in that extra room is a challenge for people to think about.
And one final question, which is, because I should ask, how many placements do you have going at a time typically?
Yeah, we'll have right now between 60 and 70 matches going at a given time. And that's over a 7-county area.
Thank you.
Representative Downing.
Well, that was one of my questions. The other question is, do you have like an average age?
Yep, we do. And I did send a summary, and I can send it again and give it to Ron of our work over the past year. But so I have it right in front of me. Our age range last year for people who shared their homes ranged from 28 to 98, but the average was 70, which makes sense. And people who found housing ranged from 22 to 80, and their average age was 50. So it is typically a different generation. but it's not what you would think. A lot of people think it's going to be, 18 or 20-year-olds or 22-year-olds. And those aren't really the people who want a home share for the most part. They want to be with people their own age, has been our experience. And in places like Burlington, the students don't have a great reputation. So a lot of hosts are not anxious to take college students.
Representative Burrows?
Thank you. I was wondering, do you carry liability insurance? Do you take on the liability for a bad share?
We have liability insurance, and that's incredibly important. We've never had an insurance claim in our 40 years that we've had to use any insurance for. Our goal is to make sure matches end well if they're going to end, we will help people do that. So homeowners still need to have homeowner insurance, and issues around liability. We don't take on liability. We have a non-liability clause, of course, just to protect our organization, as we should. But in 40 years, we have not had any incidents that require insurance.
I live downstate from the 7 counties that you cover. Mm-hmm. And there has been a tremendous amount of interest in this program down in Windsor County. And I think people are constantly calling you about how to get involved in Windsor County. So do you have any advice for the counties that are south of you?
Yeah. So, we're working in Windsor a little bit with the Thompson Center, and have done a lot of support helping them try to reach out. And we've talked with some of the, agencies on aging to see if they would want to work together on service delivery. And, I think Windsor County is certainly one of the next logical places to expand to. It's just a capacity and a funding issue for us. So, if we were able to get these 2 positions, I think that opens the door for, a next level of expansion. And I know there's other places calling too. We do have a DIY guide that we've done so that we could help people on an individual basis if they want to try to find someone on their own. But we know people need the support of an organization and the full service that we provide. And that's what our goal is. But yeah, we would love to come down to Windsor County.
I work with our local Aging in Place group, and we do a lot of work with the Thompson Center as well. And my understanding from both of those organizations is that there are so many people who want to open their homes and nobody able to come and stay. So it's the opposite problem. It is.
That's the problem with the rural areas. We have the, opposite imbalance than we do in the more urban areas. Yeah. And we don't match everyone, unfortunately, that comes to us. But the bigger the pool is, the more applicants we can get, the better chance will hook up. And I think in Windsor County, certainly working with some of the employers down there, the hospital and other places that might have workers coming to the area is a good possibility for guests.
Thank you.
Representative Elder, did you have your hand up?
No, thank you.
I guess last question for me, Kirby, is simply, we also like to think that elders should downsize, making these homes back on the market. We toss that out a lot, and I would love to get your thoughts on, I think you talked about it in terms of just because I have empty rooms doesn't mean they're empty bedrooms anymore, and I hesitate to, I can understand the theory behind that somebody, that we can reduce the dimensions of in the conversation and say just on a one-dimensional level, well, sure, elders should want to live in a condo unit. I mean, we discussed this earlier this morning where, well, actually condos may be more expensive than not having a mortgage, or not having homeowners.
We're not having a mortgage. I mean, I think a lot of seniors in their homes, don't have a mortgage. And
Right.
so the affordability question for them is big, right? Unless you're going into a subsidized unit and you're eligible for that, and you have 3 to 5 years to wait for that, which is most of the waiting list for subsidized senior housing. This is it's not as easy as saying, you should move out and go somewhere else and let a family here. I actually get pretty offended by that concept. And I've had it said to me many times. And, people have the right to make their own choices. People paid for those houses and took care of them for many years. Our goal is to just try to get more people living in those houses. Over the last 50 years, houses have gotten bigger and bigger, and there's fewer and fewer people living in those houses. And it's not just seniors. It's all types of people living in ginormous houses. So I think, we can't build enough senior housing. And the market rate senior housing that's being built, if it has bare minimum services, you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 a month for some of these places, and that's just not affordable. Somebody might be house rich, but cash poor and can't afford these type of living environments that are out there. And as I said, 5-year waiting lists at Cathedral Square for their senior housing is so even if somebody wants to move, if they start thinking about it today, they really are thinking about 5 years down the road.
Great. No, thank you for that. It's just kind of the theme is always public policy versus private ownership. And, my experience is that people just want to be in their homes.
Yeah. Because that's what's familiar and comfortable and safe. And, everything changes in our lives as we get older. And in the last bastion of control and security that we have is our home.
Okay, so to circle back, the $200,000 would be to provide as a one-time expenditure from our end, would bolster your case management programs.
That's right, and some associated costs. We're going to have some technology costs that we need to go to. Now that we have multiple offices, technology has gotten a lot more important. So we'll have some technological expenses, a new database that we're working on, case management database, to be able to serve a greater geographic area more efficiently and effectively.
Yeah.
So this allocation would not, would it add a new position?
It would add 2 new positions.
2 new positions, but those would be, you would find funding for those positions in the future.
Yes.
Thus the one-time allocation rather than ongoing.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for making it through COVID.
Yes.
It is definitely a program that we identified early on as suffering because of the pandemic. And so I'm glad you made it through so far. And we will consider this sections of the bill that have to do with appropriations probably this afternoon. And that's still, this bill still has to go through several different processes before it gets to the finish line. So expect to hear from us in July or August or something like that. So I hope not.
No, I'm looking for them.
So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you
Chris.
so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Committee, let's go off live and we'll take a 10